In the quiet town of Black Hollow, there stood an old, decaying mansion. It had been abandoned for decades, its windows covered in dust and grime, its front door left ajar by the wind. Most locals avoided it, whispering about the dark history that clung to its rotting beams. Some said it was cursed, others believed it was haunted, but none dared to speak its name aloud. One evening, a young woman named Claire arrived in Black Hollow. She was a writer in search of inspiration for her next book. She rented a small cottage on the edge of town, far enough from the mansion to not feel its oppressive presence, but close enough to wonder about it. Curiosity gnawed at her. She had heard the stories, the disappearances, the strange lights that flickered from the mansion's windows at night, and the unnerving sounds that drifted through the town after dark. It all seemed like folklore to her, something people created to explain the unexplained. But as the days passed, Claire found herself drawn to the mansion, as if something unseen was beckoning her closer. On the fifth night of her stay, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows of her cottage. She lay in bed, unable to sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of the mansion. It was then that she heard it, soft, almost imperceptible at first, like the faintest murmur, a whisper. Claire froze, her breath catching in her throat. She sat up in bed, listening. The whispering continued, growing louder now, as though someone was speaking just outside her window. She rose from her bed and crept to the window, peering out into the darkness. The only thing she saw was the mansion, its silhouette looming against the starless sky. The whispering intensified, and Claire's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't ignore it any longer. The pull was too strong. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and headed out into the night. The wind stung her face as she walked towards the mansion, the whispering guiding her like a twisted lullaby. When she reached the front steps, the door creaked open as if inviting her in. With a shiver down her spine, she stepped over the threshold. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The mansion had not seen life in years, yet the walls seemed alive, as if they were breathing with her. The whispering came from all directions now, soft and seductive, as if the very walls were speaking. "Come closer." Claire hesitated, but her feet moved on their own. Drawn forward by the voices, she wandered through the dark corridors, each step echoing in the silence. As she walked deeper into the heart of the house, the whispers grew more frantic, as though they were trying to tell her something important. It was then that she saw it, a door at the end of the hall, its frame barely visible in the darkness. The whispers seemed to originate from behind it, beckoning her closer. Claire reached for the doorknob, her hand trembling. As soon as she touched it, the door swung open with a loud bang, revealing a room completely covered in old, yellowed newspaper clippings and photographs. At the center of the room was a tall, cracked mirror, its surface obscured by layers of grime. She stepped inside, her pulse racing, and the whispers stopped. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then something moved in the mirror. A shadow, a shape, a figure. Claire's breath hitched in her throat as the figure in the mirror began to change, its form distorting into something unrecognizable. It grew tall and monstrous, its face a blur of features, its eyes dark and hollow. The whispers returned, louder now, all around her, drowning out her thoughts.
Leave before it sees you.
Claire spun around, but the room was empty. Her heart hammered in her chest as she backed toward the door. But before she could escape, the shadow in the mirror reached out, its long fingers grasping for her. Suddenly, the air grew cold, and a sharp pain shot through her chest. She gasped, her vision blurring. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices all speaking at once. You're ours now. The door slammed shut behind her, and the mansion fell silent once again. The next morning, the townspeople found Claire's empty coat on the steps of the mansion. No one saw her again, and no one dared speak of her disappearance. But some say on quiet nights, if you listen closely enough, you can hear the whispers in the wind, calling out to anyone foolish enough to listen. And if you ever find yourself standing in front of the mansion at midnight, you might just see her reflection in the broken glass.